Hey guys, what's up? I hope you're all doing great, wherever you are. Today's story was shared with us by Ashley, so a big thank you to Ashley for sharing your experience with us. If any of you want to share your own stories, feel free to send them to the email provided below. Now let's get started with this video. This story is set in New York, where Ashley lived. It begins 2 years ago when she was in her last semester of college and had just moved into a new house. A few months after she settled in, the house across the street also became vacant, and soon after, a new family moved in. Among them was a girl named Priya, who was much younger than Ashley, though interestingly, they looked the same age. Since they lived across from each other, it was only natural that Ashley and Priya eventually began talking. Slowly, they became good friends, spending a lot of time together. They would watch movies, hang out, and even make weekend plans. It was as if they were inseparable. However, around the same time, Ashley started experiencing severe pain in her head and stomach. The pain became so unbearable that she stopped going to college, not just because of the physical pain, but also because she was being unfairly treated by some of her teachers, who seemed to take out their frustrations on her for no apparent reason. As time went on, Ashley's pain only intensified, despite taking regular medication. One night, the pain grew so severe that the neighbors heard her crying out in agony. They rushed over to help her, bringing her medicine, food, and whatever comfort they could offer. But nothing seemed to help. It was during this time that Priya came over and began massaging Ashley's head. To Ashley's surprise, the pain subsided somewhat while Priya was there, but as soon as Priya left, it came back worse than before. The pain became so unbearable that Ashley's father had to rush her to the hospital. She was admitted, her energy completely drained. It was as if she was on the verge of passing out. Doctors ran all sorts of tests and treated her with IV fluids, but nothing worked. After a few days with no clear diagnosis, the hospital discharged her, suggesting they visit a bigger hospital for more extensive tests. However, even after these tests, the results came back normal. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. Ashley, confused and frustrated, returned home. She decided to rest for a few days, hoping the pain would subside. Over the next few days, while she was bedridden, her pain gradually decreased, though she remained weak. The severe headaches and stomach pain that had plagued her were now less frequent. However, one thing stood out. Her symptoms seemed to flare up whenever she visited Priya's house. Every time she stepped inside, she would feel as though her head was about to explode, and the pain in her stomach would intensify, as if something inside her was twisting her organs. But when she stayed at home, she felt a bit more at ease. Now, as Ashley reflected on these events, she realized that during the entire time she avoided visiting Priya's house, her pain had gradually diminished. The connection between Priya's home and her strange illness became undeniable, but she couldn't quite understand why this was happening. What was it about Priya's house that seemed to trigger such intense pain in her body? One night, Ashley was standing comfortably on her balcony. She had almost fully recovered. Her headaches and stomach pain had completely subsided. In just a few days, if Ashley continued to feel fine, she planned to start attending college again. Everything had returned to normal. As she wandered around the balcony, she noticed something happening at Priya's house. Priya's dad came running out, followed by her mom, who was holding an unconscious Priya. They were rushing to take her somewhere. Ashley asked, "Uncle, what happened to Priya? Where are you taking her?" Priya's mom responded, "Sweetheart, she's suffering from the same illness you had. She's got stomach pains, headaches, and we have no idea what's wrong. We're taking her to the hospital." Priya was rushed to the hospital. However, Priya's mom believed deeply in black magic and supernatural matters, so she also called a spiritual healer for advice. Strange things had been happening in their house for some time. Whenever someone visited them, whether it was a worker or a friend, they would suddenly start experiencing headaches, a negative atmosphere, or strange smells. This happened to more than a few people. They had noticed that every time someone came into the house, they felt uneasy. After Priya fell ill, Priya's parents felt like they had no other options. There wasn't much time left, so Priya's mom immediately called the spiritual healer. He asked her a few questions. What had been going on in the house? Where did they live before moving here? Who lived in the house before them? Priya's mom could answer some questions but was unsure about others. She did mention one strange incident when their maid had arrived and moments later began to cry in pain, suffering from a terrible headache. Priya's mom also shared that their previous home was in an area where, for some unknown reason, someone would die every couple of weeks. This eerie pattern had forced them to move. They had shifted to this new home urgently, and after settling in, life had become so busy that they hadn't had time to perform the typical rituals one might do when moving into a new house, like a house blessing or prayers to ward off negative energy. Priya's parents were overwhelmed with work and personal commitments, leaving no time for such rituals. They now wondered if the negative energy in their new home could have taken root because of this. The healer advised them to call an exorcist. A close friend of Priya's father recommended one. The exorcist arrived around 9 or 10 p.m. As soon as he entered, he declared, "There is a powerful, evil presence in this house. We don't have much time. We must drive it out as soon as possible." The exorcist began performing rituals in every corner of the house, working tirelessly throughout the night. By morning, around 9 a.m., the ritual was finally completed. The exorcist told them, "I've secured this house. Everything that needed to be done has been done. I hope nothing like this happens again." Before leaving, the exorcist shared another alarming piece of information. He told Priya's parents that a relative had fed Priya something and performed black magic on her. He also gave Priya something to eat. Shortly after consuming it, Priya began vomiting and expelled something strange, a large piece of what looked like chicken, complete with bones. Everyone was shocked, wondering how such a thing could have come out of her. The exorcist explained, "Someone from your family fed Priya non-vegetarian food and cast a spell on her out of jealousy." He then visited Ashley's house to talk to her dad, explaining that the black magic cast on Priya had also started to affect Ashley since she spent so much time with Priya, eating, drinking, and staying by her side. The exorcist gave both Priya and Ashley a protective thread, instructing them to wear it at all times. He assured them, "As long as you have this thread, nothing will harm you." Priya followed the instructions without any problems, but Ashley felt extremely irritated by the thread. It caused her skin to itch, and she constantly felt uncomfortable. She asked Priya, "Are you feeling anything weird from this thread?" Priya replied, "No, I feel fine. Nothing unusual." Ashley's irritation with the thread kept growing until one day she couldn't take it anymore and broke it off. She then took it to the temple and offered it there. That night, Ashley had a bizarre dream. It felt as if something had taken over her body, forcing her to go to the temple. Though she didn't want to, her body seemed to act on its own. In the dream, she entered the temple, took the thread, and threw it far away. As soon as she did this, a strange and terrifying woman appeared behind her, tall and horrifying, almost impossible to describe. She attacked Ashley, and at that moment, Ashley woke up drenched in sweat. Her head and stomach began to ache again. Ashley knew exactly what was happening now. She rushed back to the temple and tied the protective thread around her wrist again, begging the deity to protect her. The thread wasn't fully broken when she had removed it, so she was able to wear it again. She prayed earnestly, asking for protection. After this, Ashley stopped eating non-vegetarian food and began performing daily prayers, morning and evening, believing that the only thing that could save her now was divine intervention. From that day forward, Ashley never felt anything strange again. The headaches and stomach pains disappeared, and everything returned to normal. She even had a dream where the same witch from before appeared under her bed, ready to attack her. But this time, a deity appeared in the dream, saving her from the witch and assuring her, "Don't worry, I'm protecting you. No one can harm you now." This dream gave Ashley the assurance she needed. She knew she was safe as long as she stayed close to her faith. That's the story of Ashley and Priya and how they overcame dark forces. If you have a story you'd like to share, feel free to send it to me and I'll share it with my audience. This story takes us back to 2014, to the town of Dagdi, Maharashtra, where Aditya grew up in a chawl. For those unfamiliar, a chawl is a type of old tenement housing where multiple families share the same building. Aditya's memories of his childhood in the chawl are filled with warmth. except for the events of the last 2 years, moments that still haunt him to this day. In Aditya's chawl, 12 families shared a floor, with the ground floor owned by a kind and elderly landlord who lived with his family. Everyone in the chawl was like one big family, always getting along and spending time together. Among the rooms in the chawl was a particularly large one that stood out. This big room had its own kitchen, hall, bedroom, and even a private toilet and bathroom, making it quite expensive and therefore often vacant. In 2013, a new family moved into this room. They kept mostly to themselves, rarely interacting with others. The few residents who had met them mentioned that they seemed polite and reserved, which reassured everyone else. Life continued normally until one day after school, Aditya's mother warned him not to sit in the gallery next to the big room, a spot where he and his friends usually hung out. Confused, Aditya noticed that the windows of the big room were all shut, a rare sight. It wasn't until they reached their apartment that Aditya's mother revealed something unsettling. A tragic incident had occurred in that very room. The news left Aditya in shock, and the entire chawl was filled with whispers of fear. The circumstances were mysterious, especially since the family had been away at the time. What made it even more eerie was that the family vanished overnight, leaving the room empty and locked, with no word to anyone. The landlord's sons had plans to eventually renovate the chawl, but the lingering mystery of that event haunted the community. Aditya and the other residents were left wondering what really happened in that room and why the family disappeared so suddenly. 2 months pass, and things begin to make sense. It was nighttime, and all the women were sitting and chatting while the kids were playing hide and seek. Aditya, who was hiding in the gallery near the room where he used to spend 20 minutes alone, suddenly experiences a blackout. He feels dizzy and starts sweating profusely, even feeling cold despite it being summer. He was panicking, unable to focus, and his vision was blurring every few seconds. It felt as though someone was whispering softly in his ear. Struggling to regain his composure, Aditya finally manages to go downstairs. Everyone notices how pale and sick he looks and rushes to help him, including one of the women there, Auntie. Aditya explains what happened, and they comfort him, telling him to rest. Eventually, Aditya feels a little better, and they all decide to let him rest for the night. About 2 weeks after this incident, Aditya has trouble sleeping one night, so he goes to the kitchen for some water. While drinking, he hears the sound of a woman crying in great pain. The sound seems to be coming from that same room. Terrified, Aditya rushes to his mother, telling her about the strange noises. His mother gets up and goes with him to the kitchen, but by the time they arrive, the crying has stopped. She comforts Aditya, rubbing his head and putting him back to sleep. When he finally calms down, his mother reveals something shocking. She had heard the same crying sound 3 days earlier, but hadn't told anyone. She reassures Aditya that it's not just him experiencing strange things and advises him not to overthink it. A few months later, Aditya has a disturbing dream. In it, he is in a room where a group of people is torturing him. They are speaking a language he doesn't understand, but he guesses it's Bengali. They are beating him with a belt, pulling his hair and dragging him across the floor. Aditya tries to scream, but his voice is gone. Suddenly, he realizes that these are the same people, the Bengali family that used to live in the room. He wakes up in a panic, crying uncontrollably. The next day, Aditya is distracted in class, unable to focus on anything. He tells his brother about the dream, and to his shock, his brother reveals that he's had the exact same dream, as have others in their building. Aditya then gathers his friends, and they discover that many of them had similar dreams. They begin to realize that the girl's death in that room was not a suicide, but a murder. Another month passes, and many families start moving out of the building, knowing it will be demolished in 2014. Only about 7 or 8 families remain. One night, during a power outage, everyone is sitting together again, chatting. Aditya's friend, Renuka, shares something she had kept secret for a long time. She reveals that something had been hidden about the building. There was an uncle named Trilok who lived there, an alcoholic who ran a food stall and often came home late after parties. On the night of the supposed suicide, Trilok had seen something suspicious. He came home drunk around 2:30 a.m. and noticed the Bengali family packing up their things with large suitcases. They were wearing black gloves and repeatedly spraying something inside the room. Trilok saw this, but was too intoxicated to question them. The next morning, he learned about the suicide, but he knew something was off and told a few of the men in the building about what he had seen. It turned out that the building owner and the other men in the community knew all along that it wasn't a suicide, but a murder. This truth had been kept secret from everyone. Renuka's father was one of the men who knew, and he had told Renuka in confidence, but now she was revealing the truth to her friends. Everyone is shocked, realizing the murder had been covered up, and this was why the building was being demolished. No one wanted to live in a place where such horrors had taken place. A few months later, Aditya's family also moves out, and the building is finally demolished. Today, 2 large bungalows stand where the building once was. The original owner of the building has passed away, but his sons still live in the new homes. It has been 10 years since the incident, but Aditya still hasn't forgotten. He lives with the regret that he and his friends could have done something. They could have gone to the police or reported the murder, but they didn't. Now, those responsible for the girl's death are walking free, and Aditya still hears the girl's cries in his dreams. He prays that her soul finds peace and that she is no longer trapped in that room. Rachel, who used to live in Atlanta, was 12 years old at the time. Whenever summer vacation came, Rachel's mom would take her and her sister to their village to meet their grandmother. Rachel's village is in Texas, in Sugarland. As usual, during the summer holidays, Rachel went to Sugarland to meet her grandmother. When Rachel arrived there, the first thing her grandmother told her was not to roam around too much near the neighbor's house or play there, and there was no need to look at it too closely because some strange things were happening there lately. It turned out that the neighbor's house had a 16-year-old girl who was possessed. Rachel's grandmother explained that there was a devil inside that girl, and no one knew when it might act out. When Rachel and her mom asked her grandmother for more details, she shared that this all started when the girl began to lose her memory, even forgetting her own name. At night, she would hear screams, and gradually she herself started screaming every night. The girl's behavior changed drastically. She would hear footsteps even when no one was around, as if someone were following her. These incidents affected her so much that she stopped sleeping and eating. But how long can a person go without sleep? Whenever she did manage to sleep and woke up, her body would be covered in scratches, as if someone had clawed her. Many priests and shamans were called in to help, but none could cure her. Her parents decided to send her siblings to their grandmother's place for safety, leaving only the girl and her parents in the house. The siblings became terrified of her because she would act out, running around, crying, and sometimes becoming violent. This decision was made because her parents felt they couldn't keep their young children with her. The neighbors also reported that while passing by that house, they felt as if someone was calling them. Some even claimed to have seen a shadow there. The fear had grown so much that no one would pass by that house anymore. Everyone preferred to take alternate routes. In fact, the house was just 2 doors down from a shop, and most people would take a longer path to avoid it. Rachel, hearing all this, also became scared but was curious. As a city girl, she didn't really believe in these things and had never experienced anything like this. So a sense of curiosity arose in her. Although Rachel didn't go near that house, she would stare at it from her rooftop, not knowing what she was thinking. Thankfully, she didn't see anything strange or hear any voices that day, and eventually went back down to sleep. Days passed like this, and one morning, Rachel woke up to a lot of commotion in her house. Many neighbors and some relatives had gathered, all looking worried. When Rachel asked her mom what was happening, her mom explained that a strange mark had appeared on the wall of the neighbor's house, the house where the girl with the devil's shadow lived. The mark had appeared overnight. It hadn't been there before, and it looked like it was made with blood. The neighbors were frightened by this, so they painted over the mark, thinking that everything would be fine now. However, when people looked at the house that evening, they saw that the mark had reappeared, looking even scarier than before, as if someone had scratched it with their hands. It was red and ominous, resembling blood, and everyone felt terrified by it. After the strange occurrences began, the locals sought the guidance of a priest at a nearby church known for its strong spiritual significance. Many believed in the church's power, so they approached the priest with their concerns. He listened intently, and after sprinkling some holy water and reciting a few chants, instructed them to repaint the area where the ominous marks had appeared. The marks were covered, and everyone returned home feeling a sense of relief. However, by morning, the marks had mysteriously reappeared on the wall. As word spread, the atmosphere grew heavy with fear, resembling a village haunted by an unseen force. Whispers circulated about a spirit or witch lurking in the area, leaving strange marks as a warning. Groups of women began to gather at the church, engaging in continuous prayers and chants to ward off the evil presence. One group would finish their worship just as another arrived, creating a non-stop cycle of prayers that lasted throughout the day and night. Among them were Rachel and her younger sister, who were instructed by their elders to stay indoors and avoid any proximity to the church or the marked area. The fear was palpable. If something were to happen to them, they might also attract the same fate. Despite the warnings, Rachel's curiosity grew stronger. She wanted to see the mark that had everyone so terrified. One night, she quietly slipped out of her home, blending into the crowd that had gathered around the site of the mysterious marks. People had traveled from far and wide, driven by the bizarre tales surrounding the phenomenon. As Rachel neared the wall, she caught sight of the marks. Suddenly, a chilling scream pierced the air. It was a girl's voice, filled with anguish. This was no ordinary scream. It belonged to a 16-year-old girl rumored to be possessed, echoing the pain she had endured. The crowd froze in terror as the girl's cries intensified, accompanied by unsettling growls that sounded almost animalistic. Confusion reigned. Was it the girl or some creature lurking nearby? Amid the chaos, whispers spread that the situation had escalated beyond what anyone had imagined. Some urged Rachel's family to keep her away from the area, fearing for her safety. In response, her parents decided to call upon a well-respected shaman known for his spiritual prowess. The shaman arrived, conducting an exorcism within the girl's home. As he began his rituals, the girl's screams became more desperate, while the women at the church raised their voices in prayer, creating a tense competition of spiritual energy. Rachel felt an unsettling vibe. She'd never experienced anything like it before. The girl's pleas shifted from screams to frantic cries for help, begging for release from whatever force tormented her. "Please, let me go. It's not my fault," she cried, tears streaming down her face. Rachel's cousins arrived and pulled her away back to the safety of their home, but she couldn't shake her desire to understand what was happening. With determination, she snuck back onto her roof to observe the scene unfolding below. Peering through a window, she caught sight of the girl tied to a bed, surrounded by her parents and 3 shamans, one of whom appeared to be the lead. The girl looked frail, her body seemingly nothing but skin and bones. Just then, their eyes locked. Rachel felt her heart skip a beat. It was as if the girl recognized her. A chilling smile crept across the girl's face, sending a wave of fear through Rachel. In that moment, she felt a grip on her shoulder, pulling her back. It was her grandmother, who had never been so furious. Rachel had always been a rebel, but never had she seen her grandmother this angry. Days later, after the chaos had settled, Rachel returned home with her family. She frequently checked in with her grandmother about the possessed girl, who had begun to recover after the shaman's intervention. Yet the source of her healing remained a mystery. Was it the prayers at the church or the power of the shamans that had saved her? The villagers had mixed opinions. Some believed it was the continuous chanting that banished the evil spirit, while others credited the shamans. Regardless, the important news was that the malevolent force had left and the girl was slowly returning to her former self. This is the story of Rachel and the haunting events in Sugarland. When I was 18, fresh out of high school, I landed a job as a cashier at a small local hardware store. It wasn't the most glamorous job, but it paid the bills and gave me something to do while I figured out what was next in life. The store was always busy on weekends, with people coming in for tools, paint, gardening supplies, and the occasional odd item that had nothing to do with home improvement. One warm summer afternoon, I was working my usual shift at the register when an elderly couple entered the store. They shuffled slowly toward my counter, the man pushing a cart with a single item, a large, shiny wok. The woman, frail and slightly hunched, was on the phone, engaged in a low conversation that I couldn't quite make out. As they approached, the old man, who had to be at least 85, gave me a wide, toothy grin. His face was lined with wrinkles, and his blue eyes twinkled with a strange kind of mischief. I could feel his gaze linger on me as I started to scan the wok. "Do you like Chinese food, young lady?" he asked suddenly, his voice raspy but full of energy. Caught off guard by the question, I smiled politely and nodded. "Yeah, I like Chinese food." "Well, how about this then?" he said, leaning in closer to the counter, his grin widening. "Do you want to go out with me sometime? We could get some Chinese together." He gave me an exaggerated wink. I froze. The smile on my face faltered. Was he serious? His wife was standing right there, though she seemed completely absorbed in her phone call, oblivious to the entire exchange. I let out an awkward laugh, assuming he was just joking. "And no, sir, I don't think so." He seemed unfazed by my response, but there was a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. "Oh, well, that's too bad," he said, sighing heavily as if I had just turned down a lifelong dream. Then he looked over at his wife, who was still chatting away, completely disengaged from what was happening. The man turned back to me, his face now serious. "If you don't want to go out for Chinese, that's fine," he said, leaning in even closer. "But would you at least like to come live in my basement?" My heart stopped. My hands, which had been busily scanning and bagging the wok, froze mid-motion. Did I hear him right? Live in his basement? I glanced up at him, hoping to find a trace of humor in his eyes, some sign that this was all just a bizarre attempt at a joke, but his expression was completely sincere. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. No. No, thank you." The man didn't react right away. He just stared at me for a moment, as if he were genuinely considering why I might turn down such a generous offer. Finally, he gave a small shrug and stepped back, his smile returning as though nothing strange had just transpired. His wife continued her phone conversation without ever acknowledging us, her voice soft and distant. The rest of the transaction played out in an unsettling silence. I rang up the wok, handed him the receipt, and watched as they slowly shuffled out of the store. The old man gave me one last lingering look before they disappeared through the automatic doors. For the rest of my shift, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just messing with me. Maybe he was one of those elderly people who didn't quite understand how uncomfortable they could make someone with their outdated sense of humor. Or maybe, and this thought gnawed at me even more, he wasn't joking at all. Maybe he was serious, or maybe something was going on with his mind, or some form of dementia that made him think that kind of offer was normal. But what disturbed me the most was the sincerity in his voice when he asked me to come live in his basement. It didn't feel like a joke. It felt predatory. Over the years, I've thought back to that moment many times. I've wondered what would have happened if I had agreed, if I had followed that old man to his house, to his basement. Would his wife have noticed? Did she know what he was up to? Or was she oblivious to everything? Or worse, was she in on it? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share the video. See you next time.